Hi, welcome to Happy Tales. I'm Cheryl Rosenthal, the Communications and Education Coordinator here at the Oshkosh Area Humane Society.
And I'm Joni Geiger, Executive Director.
And you know, Joni, we've got a really great show today. We're going to have two special guests. Rhonda Veely, our Operations Manager, and Randy Siegel is going to be here from Wind River Rehabilitation Center, and we're going to talk about urban wildlife.
This is pretty cool, and it's very, very timely because obviously the springtime is a very, very busy time for this, and this is obviously when people get involved in a lot of the urban wildlife, so perfect timing.
Right, so let's get started and see what we can and cannot do.
Super.
Rhonda, I really want to thank you for being here today, and Randy coming and bringing us all these wonderful little stuffed toys to help teach us all about urban wildlife and what we can do to protect it. So I think our audience would like to know, first of all, what is Wind River and what kind of calls do you get?
Well, Wind River is a wildlife rehabilitation center, which means we take in injured and orphaned wildlife, mostly raptors, but we take like sometimes 50 calls a day on urban wildlife situations. When the animals come in, we nurse them back to health. Sometimes we actually have to teach them to be wild again, and our goal is to release them back into the wild.
Now, I don't know if all of our listeners, what's a raptor?
Oh, good question. A raptor is a bird of prey or a hawk, like a red-tailed hawk is a raptor.
Okay. And what are owls?
I
mean, are they considered a bird of prey?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. So, and I think a lot of people think of those animals just outside, you know, in rural conditions.
Well,
so where will we find
all
owls?
of these animals that we have here, and all the owls and red-tailed hawks and eagles, they're all urban dwellers. It's just amazing what you can have in your backyard without even knowing it. We were talking before about ducks, and it's not uncommon today for ducks to be setting up a nest right next to somebody's steps on the way into their front door and stay there until the eggs hatch. And they might be miles from water. But once they go, we call it the Mallard March. Once those eggs hatch, the mom takes them off, and they go trotting down the road to the nearest water source, and it might be a neighborhood ditch, might be a puddle somewhere, but they live right in the city.
And so what should people do if they see a Mallard March?
A Mallard March, well, we encourage people to support these Mallard Marches, and that just means kind of keeping an eye on them, and if they're in heavy traffic, if it's safe, you always want to be safe if you're doing any kind of rescue, as you know, and to stop traffic if possible and let them follow you across the street.
Okay.
And they just march on down.
So besides mallards, what other types of calls do you get frequently this time of year?
This time of year, we started out actually getting a lot of calls for great horned owls, for the little owlets, and I'm going to just use a little demonstration here. Excuse me for standing in front of you. We're going to pretend this is a laundry basket, but we got our first call, I think it was March 28th, on a great horned owl being out of the nest, and we've had some really windy, wet weather. And so the great horned nests are not very sturdy, and it's very easy for them to fall out. And some of these nests are like 40 feet high.
Oh, wow. And how many little owlets would there be in a nest, possibly?
3 to 4 sometimes, depending on the year, how good the food is and what their territory is. All that kind of thing comes into play with that. And if we see a baby owl on the ground, we want to make sure it's healthy. So the first thing we do is we look and have people assess whether the parents are there. And they'll be sitting in a nearby tree. They won't come down, but they'll be in a nearby tree watching. And visually, we ask people to look, make sure there's no blood. Later in the season, make sure there's no flies or fly eggs around them. And if they appear to be healthy, we tell people to get like a laundry basket, a wicker basket, plastic, whatever. If it's plastic, just make sure there's holes drilled in the bottom for drainage. And then I just tell people to use pine needles or whatever is actually on the ground in the area.
Okay, so like pine needles or dead leaves, you could put those in there.
Right.
Anything that's natural.
Right.
And then you're going to put the owlet in there?
Right. We
and
put the owlet in.
How am I going to pick him up? Am I going to use my hands?
Good
or am
question.
I going to...
Because a lot of people think if you touch, then your
question.
smell is there, and then the parents might not come back for them. So.
And it's not an issue of smell. It's more an issue of the oils that are on our hands affect their feathers. And so it's always good to take a towel and wrap it around them and then put them in the basket. It's an old wives' tale about touching them and the mom won't come back. They don't have a sense of smell, so it's not an issue. Only an issue as far as attracting predators, because we do have a smell.
Do people have to be concerned about getting injured from the owl or catching anything? Or
The owlets, no, and not catching anything. The mother or father, sometimes they can be really aggressive. So I tell people to have a spotter. You know, one person do the work, the other person be watching to see that that mom or dad is going to stay in the tree. And they both take care of the baby, so they may both be around. But to put this nest in the tree, this is going to be our actual nest for this season. And their original nest might be 40 feet up, and they might have 2 babies already in there.
I'm not going that high.
Yeah, I don't blame you. And we want people to be safe. That's, again, always a factor to consider. And so a 6-foot ladder, put it against the tree. If you have branches already, then set it in the crotch of a tree as close to the trunk as possible. Take a rope and tie it in as tight as possible, and then leave it be. And we like people to check on it, but obviously if they stand right there, it's not going to be a good thing. So we ask them to step back or go in the house, take binoculars or telephoto lens or something, and watch. And usually the mom is right there, and she'll take care of both nests.
Okay. So even though one owlet is down here and one owlet's way up in the tree, Mom and Dad are going to feed and take care of them.
Right, and we call it renesting, and it's been very, very successful. This year, I've been talking to people in Michigan as well, and we've had maybe 8 renestings and 2 that weren't able to be renested because the parents weren't around. So it's generally successful, and obviously it's the best way to go. A mother is always better.
Mom is better than anything that we can possibly do.
What happens to those that can't be renested, or if parents aren't around, then what would be the next step?
The next step would be bringing them into the center, and I have a surrogate great horned owl, and he would raise them. And then they stay with us till August or September, and then we put them out for release. We make sure that they can kill their own food and have a good chance of surviving, and we'll put them back out.
There are the occasional people who think it might be a good idea to take all different kinds of animals, including owls, into their home and try to raise it as a pet. So what would you say to those people, or what would be your advice?
Good question. It's not a good idea ever. Wildlife belongs out in the wild. We are caregivers to domestic animals, and we have a great relationship. But wild animals need our respect, and they need us to be responsible for them, but not taking them in to our homes. As a wildlife rehabilitator, I have like 10 different permits from state and federal government in order to do what I do. And so you have to really know diets, you have to know habitat, natural history, and not everybody's going to have that information, and so you're doing a real disservice to the wildlife. Say you have an opossum that someone found, mom is dead on the road, and there's a baby. And you think, oh gosh, this is so cute, you know, I can take this home and feed it. And they're very difficult to care for, and they have to have a real specific diet, or they do not live very long.
They won't develop correctly. I remember you having a squirrel that somebody had taken in, and they didn't feed it the right things, and his bones didn't harden, and there were all kinds of skeletal problems that little Rocky had.
Exactly.
Because somebody misfed him, and he couldn't be re-released into the wild. And I think that's sad to think that had he maybe been brought to you, you maybe could have rehabbed him, and he would have had.
And that's very common, unfortunately. And the lady with Rocky was a nurse, and she fed him human baby formula 24 hours around the clock. And they not only do they not need that feeding schedule, the food is totally the opposite of what they need. So it's very important to know what you're doing and what diets they would have in captivity. You might have to feed a different diet to begin with than you would right before release. So there's a lot of things to consider. As long as we're doing the nest, we'll do the birds. Would you two like to help me and be trees? Just
Sure.
This is going to be a branch.
Okay, I'm a branch.
And you're going to have a branch here. And I'm just going to do a demonstration with our little cardinals.